This $4.2 trillion giant, the world's third largest economy, just made not only the biggest Bitcoin backflip of all time, but it might have just been the fastest. Have a look at this. Literally 5 days ago, Japan urges app stores to remove Bybit, KuCoin, and other crypto exchanges. Now, I think that's a little bit interesting because 2 days later, the Japanese government comes out and says, yeah, you know what? We are actually going to lift our bans and we're going to go one step further. We want to approve Bitcoin spot ETFs, and we're even going to remove the taxes on Bitcoin and drop them from 50% to 20%. So what is going on in the third largest economy? Is Japan all of a sudden watching what is going on over in America and making a little bit of a pivot to adopt Bitcoin? Today, that's what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be talking about maybe who or what other countries in Asia might be influencing Japan, or whether it might be a public company in Japan who right now is already doing some pretty interesting things. Let's not forget the little tiny company that is Metaplanet, and it used to be tiny, now has a stock chart that looks like this. And maybe the Japanese government cannot ignore the facts anymore, because we can see Metaplanet is up 3,600% in 12 months. That is a 36x, ladies and gentlemen. If you put $100 in Metaplanet 12 months ago, you'd be squatting on $3,600. Not the worst return. But Metaplanet is all of a sudden the best performing stock in the entire Japanese stock market. You guys can read the headline. Maybe the government is watching what is going on in Japan, maybe? Who knows? Who knows? Can Bitcoin save Japan? That's what Timbo is saying in the chat here. Can Bitcoin save Japan? Who knows? Michael says that Bitcoin is the king. Maybe the Japanese government has realized that. Because let's have a look at what the Japanese government has now set and changed. Okay, I want to look at the pivot. I want to see exactly what's happened here in Japan. Because we can read the top part of this article. Japan's FSA asked Apple and Google to block downloads of 5 crypto exchanges that failed to comply with regulations. This was only 5 days ago. And they didn't just go after KuCoin and Bybit. They also went after BitGet, LB Bank, Exchange, and a number of others. So they pretty much went after all of the major exchanges. We can see 5 exchanges were banned. 5. So this is a pretty comprehensive attack. And let's not forget, at the time that this attack happened 5 days ago, Japan had 55% taxes on people trying to sell their Bitcoin. 55%. They were going to take half of your profits if you wanted to sell Bitcoin in Japan. But all of a sudden, this has kind of changed. There's been a little bit of a, let's call it what it is, a pivot. Let's call it exactly what it is. CCN is calling it the biggest crypto policy shift yet, with ETF approval and major tax cuts. Not my words. This is what the article was saying 3 days ago. Let's have a look at what exactly is happening. Bitcoin first investment firm Metaplanet is Japan's fastest growing stock in history, up by 3,500%. If you don't mind, have a look at that. Now, there are no Bitcoin ETFs in Japan right now, but that looks to be changing. For those who didn't know, ETFs were banned in Japan recently. We can see it as clear as day. New article dropped 2 days ago. Japan moves to lift bans on Bitcoin ETFs. It's pretty crazy how quickly things are happening in the country with a whopping $4.213 trillion GDP. They're not a small country. They are really not a small country. I want to show you guys a little bit more from this article here because I think it's breaking down what's just happened in Japan in a lot more detail. So let's have a look at it. Japan's crypto overhaul. What is happening? What's changed? We can see taxes are being dropped from 55% to 20%. It's huge. It's a massive 60+% reduction. And this could open the doors for Bitcoin spot ETFs to launch. The article said it here. They are the 4th largest economy in the world. I wasn't just making that up. They're the 4th largest economy in the world. The development follows reports that Metaplanet, Japan's largest Bitcoin company, has become the fastest growing stock in Japan. Why? Thanks to its Bitcoin pivot. Now, this is where I think things get really interesting. The firm Metaplanet has attracted around 50,000 backers, the majority of whom are retail investors, indicating a burgeoning appetite for crypto and crypto-related investments in Japan. And all of a sudden, we can see Japan has become the hottest stock. There are thousands of public companies in Japan. And all of a sudden, we can see there are 50,000 backers of Metaplanet right now, today, in Japan. And maybe, just maybe, this is one of the reasons why the government is being forced to make a little bit of a pivot on their Bitcoin position. Maybe, just maybe. A lot of the times, change does kind of come from the bottom up. This is something a lot of people forget about El Salvador. The Bitcoin Beach project was created in 2019, well before anybody whispered the words of Bitcoin legal tender to Mr. Bukele. That law got pushed through in 2021. Maybe something similar is happening here in Japan. Maybe it's the little guys saying, yeah, you know what? We don't want to own the Japanese stock market because, as I'm about to show you guys here in a moment, it's been underperforming for a very long time. Maybe it's the little guy saying, yeah, you know what? I want some Bitcoin. If you are the little guy in Japan, I'd always like to remind you, and not just remind the little guy in Japan, but remind the little guy everywhere, please don't buy publicly traded stocks, publicly traded companies. I mean, you can do what you want with your own money. Nothing on this channel should be construed as financial advice. But holding an asset that nobody can touch, like Bitcoin, is why we're all in Bitcoin. It's the sovereignty that you get over your money. If you are looking to get a little bit more sovereignty over your money, we always like to remind you guys about what Azteco is doing. Azteco is this really cool, very interesting solution for many of you guys to buy Bitcoin from anywhere around the world. Azteco is in 190 different countries all around the world, and you can buy Bitcoin starting at just $10. So these little Azteco vouchers, they're very similar to like a prepaid gift card, but it's for Bitcoin. And the really cool thing about these Azteco vouchers is you don't need an account, you don't need an application, you don't need the hassle of signing up with an exchange, having to go through all of the forms and the processes that you have to go through to buy Bitcoin at some exchanges. Azteco is unique. They're globally accessible. Again, 190 countries. It's nearly every country. With as little as $10, you can start buying Bitcoin. Hassle-free, stress-free, using alternative methods. Check out Azteco. Everything you need to know about them will be linked down below. And let's talk a little bit more about what exactly is going on in Japan. Because I mentioned it to you guys a second ago. I wanted to show you guys the chart of Metaplanet. And I think it's an interesting one to explore. Because we can see very clearly Metaplanet is rapidly diverging from the price of Bitcoin. So this here's the price of Bitcoin. Let me zoom in a little bit. A lot of people are a little bit bored with what Bitcoin's been doing over the past couple months. Since November, that's the first big blue line I've got on the chart, Bitcoin's been going sideways. And what's interesting is so's MicroStrategy, which is still the preferred way that most people like to get a little bit of Bitcoin beta. We can see MicroStrategy has also been correcting alongside Bitcoin since November. Now, why I think Metaplanet is, let's just say, interesting. Again, nothing we say here should be construed as financial advice. But Metaplanet looks to be kind of doing its own thing. Metaplanet, since November, has been aggressively rallying, mind you. Since November, it's up by 200%. That's right, it's tripled. Here in November, on November 1st, it was 1,500 Japanese yen. Now it's 5,700 Japanese yen. It's nearly up by 4x. I mean, that chart's just incredible. I was going to put that on the thumbnail of today's video because have a look at it. I'm not surprised that 50,000 Japanese entities are now FOMOing and scrambling and racing to get a little bit of Bitcoin exposure through Metaplanet. Again, we'd encourage you guys, buy the real thing, buy Bitcoin. You can do that using those really cool, groovy little vouchers you can get from Azteco in 190 different countries. And again, I think focus on what Dingo Booty is talking about in the chat. Bitcoin is the way. Again, and we talk a little bit about what's going on in the public corporation space and that adoption and how all of those entities are adopting Bitcoin. We do talk a lot about the ETFs and the Larry Finks and the institutions all adopting Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin is the way. As Michael says in the chat, Bitcoin is the king. We got a comment here from MJB. With all these countries and corporations and US states interested in Bitcoin, maybe a typical severe down draw bear market in the price of Bitcoin could be a thing of the past. Tend to agree with you, MJB. I think it's certainly a possibility that we don't see any of these major bear markets again. Again, keyword being possibility. I don't know where the price of Bitcoin is going in the short or the medium term, but I will show you by the chart I'm pulling up for you guys right now. So Bitcoin's seen at least 5 of these really large, big 80% corrections. Maybe, just maybe, the entities in the space today might mute Bitcoin's volatility to the downside. I still think we're going to see a lot of volatility. I think volatility is going to increase much more and for much longer than most people do. Again, caveats. But maybe to the downside, we don't see these big 80% corrections that I'm highlighting on the charts for you guys right now. Bitcoin has seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 big 80% corrections in its 15-year life. I think the probabilities of us seeing another 80% correction with a 2-year extended bear market are lower. Sure, maybe we do see an 80% correction again. Not saying it's a 0% probability. What I am saying is that I think the probabilities that we see an 80% correction followed by this 2-year extended period of declining prices, maybe they're behind us. Maybe they're less likely. Not maybe, I do think they're less likely. And that's because I think we've got entities stepping in to buy the Bitcoin dip. And these entities have got pretty big pockets. So yeah, I mean, we could see an 80% correction, but maybe we just won't see this long 2-year period of price drawing down. Just my thoughts. Again, a lot of people, let's zoom in on the most recent bull run, because I was screaming this from the rooftops. I said, I don't think you're going to get a long amount of time or a big chance to buy Bitcoin at 16K. At the time, people were like, oh, it's all over. Bitcoin's going to 12K. Don't buy Bitcoin now because historically, Bitcoin takes a long time to bottom. This is what the perma bears were saying. At the time, I thought the fact that we broke 20K was kind of like an incredible buying opportunity. Again, go check the tapes, go watch the videos I was making at the time. I was screaming from the rooftops, buy Bitcoin, guys. I thought 20K was the natural bottom because why? 20K was your previous 2017 all-time high. Who knows? So maybe we're going to see something similar in the next bull run. I don't know. I'm just painting you guys some hypothetical thought experiments for you guys to think about and prepare for. But the reason I bring up this tangent is because a lot of people are certain they know where the bottom is, they know where the top is, and at the end of the day, nobody knows anything for certain. So sure, maybe the probabilities of big 80% corrections are less. They certainly could be. But we're just going to have to explore those possibilities together. There's 1,460 of you guys tuning in tonight between Twitter and YouTube. I will say to all of you guys, I hope you're enjoying your Thursday night. I know it's a little bit late tonight. It's 7:30. So I wish you a happy Thursday, and I'll see you all in another live stream tomorrow. Thank you, Andy, and everyone who tuned in. I tend to agree Japan will not get